It's called Making the Most of Uncertain Times. And I don't know if you realize or not, but we are living in uncertain times. Did you know that?
Pretty applicable.
Yeah, there's a deadly virus out there that has lured its ugly head to the tune of this week we passed the grim statistic of over 500,000 people in the United States alone has died attributed to the coronavirus. We just passed that milestone this week. So there's a deadly virus out there. We are uncertain when it comes to our freedoms. We're wondering, when will our freedoms be restored? Like, when can we go to restaurants again and actually sit down and not have to just take it out?
When can we get rid of these?
When can we get rid of these masks? And in the first service, we talked about August, Sandy's nephew, and he has a physical problem with wearing a mask. It's not only just hard to breathe, but it affects his whole body chemistry. And he has applied to a school of chiropractic back in the Midwest. And he's told them, he said, I want to come, and they've accepted him, except now he's writing and said, well, I'm not able to wear a mask, and they've said, oh, well, then you're not welcome here. So his whole life has been changed by that. When will we be able to go to a movie theater? When will they open? Our sporting events have been closed. How would you like to go on a cruise? Yeah. Nobody's going on them right now. And maybe you wouldn't even go if you could, but some people enjoy that. Or, travel of any sort. A lot of people you don't want to fly on an airplane. And anyway, family gatherings have been restricted. You can't even visit your relative in a nursing home or in the hospital. Usually that's part of a ministry of the church, as we visit people in hospitals. We haven't even been able to do that. Church gatherings. Now today is a good day. We've got a great group here today, but it's been hard through this past year of being able to get together. So hopefully that's going to be coming to an end, but we don't know. It's uncertain because now there's a vaccine. And we're even uncertain about the vaccine. I was talking to my mom about it because she's eligible now to be able to take it, and she's not sure she wants to take it. She said, well, I want to wait and see what the side effects are. So anyway, and then there's the virus itself. It's changing. It's morphing into something else, and we're not even sure that the vaccine is going to be able to keep up with the virus. So anyway, we live in uncertain times. And so what do? Do we just hunker down and curl up in a corner and just wait for things to dissipate? Or what can we do during these uncertain times? How can we make the most of our time in the midst of all this uncertainty? That's what we want to talk about today. And we're going to look there at the end of James chapter 4. And the first thing I would say in your notes, no one can accurately predict the future. Now, I know there are people out there that would want you to believe otherwise, but no one can accurately predict the future. And that's what James says in verses 13 and 14. He says, come now, you who say today or tomorrow, we will go to such and such a city, spend a year there, buy and sell, and make a profit. Whereas you do not know what will happen tomorrow. So nobody can predict the future. If we could predict the future, we all would have invested in a company called Amazon when it came public on May the 15th, 1997. You could have bought a share of Amazon for $1.33. When you adjust for the stock splits, it was actually $16 a share, but it's split 3 times since then. So it's the equivalent of $1.33. You could have bought a share of Amazon that is now worth over $3,000 a share. So if you could have just rounded up $1,000 back in 1997. Most of you can round up $1,000. I'd have trouble doing that, but most of you could do it. And if you would have just put $1,000 and bought Amazon, that would now be worth $2,323,000. You could even retire on that.
I would hope.
Yeah, you would hope. But we don't, because we can't predict the future. None of us can. Over the Christmas vacation, I spent some time with my grandchildren, and there's a couple of my grandchildren, William and Taylor. They're about junior high age now, and they've gotten into watching old movies during this pandemic time. And one of the movies they like is one that I like as well. It's called Back to the Future. Maybe you'll remember that. And since there aren't any new good movies coming out, we're going back and watching some of the old favorites. And so we were watching that. And in Back to the Future, there's a segment where Biff, he's kind of the villain of the story, but he gets a hold of an almanac, a sports almanac from the future. And so he is able to bet on, now we don't condone betting here, but he did it, and because he knew the future, he could bet on all the sports games and he never lost. And he amassed a fortune because he knew the future. Well, of course, that's a fictional story, and that doesn't happen. That's not real. So, but there is a disclaimer. Got one disclaimer for you, and that is that the Bible does accurately predict the future, by the way. We call it prophecy. And there is a verse in 2 Thessalonians 2, in chapter 2, and I just want to read it for you. There are about 4 things that it predicts here that haven't happened yet, by the way, that you need to look for these 4 things. It says, "Now, brethren, concerning the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and gathering together to him." So that's number 1. In the future, Jesus is coming back, and we need to be ready for that. We need to be preparing for that. It helps to look forward to that. I'm looking forward to when the Lord returns. But that's not all. If you skip down to verse 3, it says, "Let no one deceive you by any means. For that day," talking about when Jesus comes back, "that day will not come unless the falling away comes first, and the man of sin is revealed." It talks about a falling away. And what it's talking about here is there will be a great falling away from the church, from the traditional faith tenets, doctrines of the church that we've held dear, that the Bible teaches. We're told that in the last days, before Jesus comes back, there's going to be a falling away from these truth teachings of the church. So that's another thing that's in the future. And then as you go on, it says, "And the man of sin is revealed." Now this is talking about the Antichrist. You've probably heard of the Antichrist, the son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. So this Antichrist, you say, well, what's the Antichrist going to be like? You're all familiar with Hitler. The Antichrist will make Hitler look like a peacemaker. The Antichrist will be even worse, much worse than even Hitler was. So, and that's kind of the spirit. He'll be smoother than Hitler was, because he'll be able to convince almost everyone that he's the answer, that you need to vote for him, and just everything will be right. But it won't be right. And anyway, we could say a lot about him, but he's coming. That's something in the future that the Bible is predicting. Now the last thing is also there. I don't know if you caught it, but it said, so that he sits as God in the temple of God. Now, where is the temple of God? Well, it's supposed to be in Jerusalem. It's not there right now. There's another thing called the Dome of the Rock that's sitting where the temple used to sit. And so this is another thing that's going to happen in the future, is that the temple of God will be rebuilt in Jerusalem. So anyway, the Bible predicts a lot of things in the future. Those are just 4 of them, and they're found there in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. But that's not what we're talking about today. Today, we're talking about uncertain times and what can we do in uncertain times. And number 2, there are mistakes that we make when it comes to the future. It is a mistake to make plans about the future without asking God and listening for His direction. So there in our, if you look on the screen, if you look down, it says in verse 15, instead of making these plans, well, today, we're going to go into this such and such city, we're going to start a business, we're going to do this, we're going to make all this money. Instead, in verse 15, it says, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we shall live and do this or that. But now you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. So the mistake of the man in James chapter 4 is that he doesn't listen to God for direction. So it's not wrong to make plans. We all make plans, and we're encouraged in the Bible to make plans. God is a God of order. He wants us to be people of order. He wants us to have plans. But we have to tenor that with what it says in Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, which the familiar verse says, trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make your paths straight. So what this is saying is, trust in the Lord with all your heart, and don't rely just on your own understanding. So we all make plans, but if we never consult with each other, and more importantly, if we never consult with God, then our plans may go awry. I don't know if that's happened to you. It's happened to me several times in my life. I made these great plans, and I forgot to include God. And I forgot to listen to God, and the plans did not work out. Now, one of the things that I am really concerned about is that this church would grow. I think about that just lots, every day. I think about how can we make the church grow? And I've talked with Marion and Frank, and all of us we're really concerned about that. And we have been for a long time. We talk about it. And then the elders, when we get together, Don and Kelly, with the 3 of us, we all get together and we want this church to grow. And we come up with all kinds of ideas, and we throw things around and we talk about it. And so we've had these plans, but you know what? None of us saw COVID coming. We were making all these plans about how we're going to do this or we're going to do that. And then COVID hit, and it almost shut the church down. We just kind of came to a grinding halt, and we didn't know what to do, and so we had to reevaluate. And it's kind of like, most of you, I think, have a GPS in your car. And when you go to a place that you're not familiar with, you rely on that GPS to tell you where to go, right? And so you're listening and you're kind of watching the map. You're keeping one eye on the map and the other eye on the road, hopefully. And you're trying to figure out, okay, where am I going to turn? Where do I need to go? And recently I was over in Bend. Now, I don't know Bend very well, and so I was trying to find this certain place. And it says, okay, up ahead you need to turn to the right. But it didn't tell me which lane to get into. And so I wound up in the wrong lane. Has this ever happened to you? You're supposed to turn, but you can't, and so you have to go off course. And so I wound up going straight ahead. Well, then I looked at my GPS, and it said recalculating. And it was drawing a whole new route for me on the map, because I had missed the turn. And it wasn't just leaving me on my own, it was going to devise a new plan for me, which it did. And finally, in a roundabout way, I got to my destination, but it wasn't the way that was designed first. It wasn't the way that I had planned out. It had to be recalculated. And as you and I make plans in our own lives and for this church and our families and our jobs, our careers, sometimes we have to turn lemons into lemonade. Sometimes it has to be recalculated. Things don't go the way we thought they would or they should. And so rather than just throw up our hands in disgust and quit, we need to recalculate. And that's what we do here at the church. And so we started recording our services. You probably noticed the camera here, and I know it's annoying, but when you see that camera, what I want you to think of is that this message that gets shared in the church is going to people that we never were able to reach before, even as far as Africa. Frank is in touch with a group of people in Africa that watch our services. We weren't able to do that before, and I know of others as well, and we want to increase that. And by the way, Robert back there, Robert Rice, he takes care of our sound and he makes sure the microphones work. And part of our budget is we set aside a little bit of money to upgrade some of our equipment. And Robert was just sharing with me today that he's very frugal. He took the budget and he said, we don't need that much money. I can get that equipment for a lot cheaper. And so he's got a new camera now that it's not going to be here. It's going to be mounted in the back. So we won't have this here in a few weeks. And he said that camera, you can see a mosquito from about 2 miles away, if you zoom in on it. Not that we're going to do that, but we could. And so anyway, we're looking forward to new equipment. And his goal is that we'll be able to stream our service live, live and in color, at 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock in the Sunday mornings, instead of having to wait until later in the day to have it available. So anyway, enough about that. Number 3. Well, before we do that, I want to say one more thing. No one saw a couple of years ago in our church that Marion was going to come down with Parkinson's. No one planned that. He didn't plan it, for goodness sakes. It wasn't his idea. But because of that, we're recalculating. We've redefined his ministry. And part of his ministry now is calling on people. You've probably gotten a phone call from Marion or a text saying, how you doing? We miss you and we care about you. What can we be praying about? And also, it's given Marion a chance to dust off some of his old notes that he used to have a teaching ministry in another church where he developed a whole curriculum of basic doctrinal teachings about what our church stands for. And he started to teach that. I don't know if you've noticed, on Sunday mornings in the brick room at 9 o'clock, he's teaching a series of just Christian basics. And I would encourage you to take advantage of that. So all that to say that we have to recalculate sometimes. We have to redefine ourselves because for whatever reasons, what we were doing isn't going to work anymore. We have to do it different. All right, number 3. It is a mistake in these uncertain times to presume how long we will be here in the future, as our stay on this planet is very short. So, start your ministry now before it's too late. And Frank was talking about this in his sermon in the first service. We kind of both wound up preaching about the same thing today. James 4:14 says, "Yet you do not know what your life will be like tomorrow. For you are just a vapor that appears for a little while and then vanishes away." Now, one day at our men's Bible study, after it was over, a bunch of us were talking afterwards, and I can't remember exactly what we were talking about, but I do remember this. Marion ran into the kitchen, and he came out with a bottle of Windex, and he sprayed it into the air, and he said, "That's your life." Because it was gone in a couple of seconds. You could see the vapor, and then all of a sudden, where to go? He said that's what our life is like on this earth. It's very short. When you compare it to eternity, even if you live to be 100 years old, which not very many people do, but let's say you did, it's a blip on a chart. It's a mist. It just doesn't last that long. And so the days that we have here on this earth are precious and few, and we need to take advantage of them. We have a tendency to not act until everything is perfect. We want as soon as everything's perfect, then I'll do such and such. As soon as I quit smoking, then I'll become a Christian and I'll come down to your church and get baptized. A lady actually told me that one time. Don't wait that long. Don't wait for things to be perfect. Start now. God will take care of the rest. God has a ministry for every one of us. Now, it may not be singing a solo or preaching a sermon or calling people in the hospital, but there are plenty of ministries that we have, that the Lord has, that God has called people to. And I don't know what it is for you, but I would encourage you to get involved in that ministry sooner or later. Maybe you've already started. Continue on. Don't give up in these troubling times. And the reason we want things to be perfect is because if you're like me, you're afraid you're going to make a mistake. You're afraid that things aren't going to go all that well. I had a job a long time ago. I told you before that it was in a plywood mill in Independence. And in this plywood mill, I had a job on the green chain. And the job was this wood would get chopped and it would come out on this conveyor belt. And then my job was to pull the wood off and stack it in various carts, depending on the size, depending on whether the wood was in good shape or bad. And so there were about 5 different carts that I had to choose from. And when I first started, I was really confused. It was a lot to learn, and I didn't know exactly. I was kind of afraid of making a mistake. And usually things went along pretty well. And there were 4 of us on this chain. So these other guys, they were all experienced. And for a while, they'd come out in 27-inch chunks, and that went in a certain cart. And usually one guy could handle all of that, or maybe if one got by him, then the second guy would get it. And then sometimes it would get a little more choppy. If you got into some bad wood, there'd be what they call strip, which is just narrow strips of wood. Well, that went in a separate cart. Then there were big ones that were 54 inches wide. They went in a separate cart. And then there was a thing called fishtail. And that was where half of the wood was good and the other half was just rotten on the other end. But half of it was good. And so they had a way of salvaging that, and that went in a separate cart. Well, everything was going along fine until all of a sudden we ran into this random piece of wood or log, and it was just rotten. And so all these different sections of wood started coming down the line all at once. And it overwhelmed me. It was like, I was like a deer in the headlights. I just froze. I didn't know what to do. I was afraid of making mistakes, so I didn't do anything. And the other 3 guys were just flinging wood with both hands, one way this way, one way that, flipping wood around. And I was just like, wow, these guys are... And this kept up. Finally, the guy across from me said, "Don't just stand there, do something, even if it's wrong." Have you ever been in that shape where you didn't know what to do, and so you just shut down, you didn't do anything? And life was just passing you by, and everybody else was frantically trying to do something. You're not doing anything. Well, we need to do something even if it's wrong. Jesus put it this way. He said, "I know your deeds. You're neither cold nor hot. You're lukewarm. And because you are lukewarm, I will vomit you out of my mouth." He said, "I wish that you were cold or hot, but because you're lukewarm, I can't do anything with you." Now I thought about it. Really, Jesus, you would rather I be cold than lukewarm? Yes, because once you are committed to something, even if it's wrong, Jesus can work with that and He can turn you around. I defy you to go out when the service is over today, get in your car, put your car in park, and turn the wheel, and see how far you get. See, I defy you to turn the direction of that car. You can't do it, can you? You have to be moving, even if you're moving in the wrong direction. Now, a lot of times I will park on the side of the church here because it's convenient. I can come in. But when I go out in my car, my house is over there, and my car is pointed there. So what do? I start driving that way because that gets me moving, and then I can get it turned around so I'm going the right direction. That's what the Lord will do with us when we start moving, when it doesn't have to be perfect. We strike out, we do it anyway. All right, so number 4, moving right along. The third mistake we make about the future is when we put off doing what we know is right and good, but we don't do it right now. We procrastinate. All right? So James talks about this at the end there. It says, instead you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. But as it is, you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. So, and here's the key. For one who knows the right thing to do and does not do it, for him it is sin. Now, over the Christmas holidays, somehow our refrigerator sprang a leak. You know, your refrigerator magically gives you ice or water if you stick a cup in there, and it'll just put water in your cup or ice in your cup. Well, it isn't actually magic. There's actually a hose that goes back in the back of your refrigerator that feeds your refrigerator water, and somehow it cools that water or it turns it into ice. Well, over the holidays, somehow that plastic tube in the back of our refrigerator sprang a little pinhole leak, and we didn't know that it happened. Until about 3 or 4 days later, we noticed that it was getting wet under our refrigerator, right in front of our refrigerator. And so we pulled it out, and we discovered that this leak had been going on for days. We don't even know how long. And by the time we discovered it, a massive amount of our kitchen floor, which is wood plank, and by the way, I don't recommend that you put wood planks in your kitchen floor, but we did. And it was all warped, and it was all soaked, and so we called the insurance man, and he came out, and he said, well, you're going to have to replace the whole floor. Ah, wow, replace the whole floor. So, you know, we arranged for a floor guy to come in, and all the dryers and fans and plastic was around the kitchen. They got it all dried out, and then the floor guy came in, and he replaced it. This all took place over the last couple of months, so our house has been torn up. But somehow I got it in my mind that the insurance guy was going to pay all the bills. And we just tell him what the bill was, and he'd take care of paying it. Well, I called him up when the floor guy had finished, and I said, well, it's time to pay the floor guy. And he said, oh, I already sent you the checks. I said, huh? He said, yeah, it's in the mail. You should have gotten it a few weeks ago. Well, yeah, I got something from the insurance company, but I just thought it was a bill. And so that got tossed aside. Well, fortunately, we were able to dig through some stacks of mail and found this check that he had sent out. And so, whew, boy, but you know, I'm one of these people that sometimes I put things off. And that was one of the things that had gotten put off. But anyway, I finally got around to, okay, I need to put this in our bank. So with our bank, you can take a picture of your check. You do that, but you have to sign it on the back. And so when I went to sign it, I noticed that the check was made out to myself, to Ann, and to our mortgage company. They stuck the mortgage company name on there too. So, oh, well, how do I deposit this? So I called up the insurance guy. I said, so how do we deposit this check? He said, oh, you need to call your mortgage company. And then each one is different, and they'll tell you how to do it. Oh, okay. Well, so then I put that off for a few days. But finally got around and called them and went through all the phone tree and finally got a person. And they said, oh, you need to mail us the physical check so we can put that in a department. They'll sign it. Then they will snail mail it back to you. Well, I don't know. I guess when you write a check, there's only a window of time you have before it expires worthless. And so we're kind of running on to the end of that now, and I'm starting to panic a little bit. So yes, we finally got it mailed up. But here's my point, is I knew what the right thing to do was. This was money that needed to be paid to different folks that worked on our floor. And so it was right to do that. And I knew that it meant cashing some checks and getting money in the right place, but I put it off. And you know what? I'm confessing to you today, that's sin. When God tells us to do something, we know it's right. There's no question. But we put it off. Anyway, that is sin. And I don't know what it is in your life that God has put on your heart. Maybe it's a ministry of some sort. Maybe it's a bill you need to pay, like it was with me. Maybe it's, who knows what it is, but you know what it is. And you put it off. And what I want to challenge you today is to get that right, to get her done. Not put it off, as James was talking about here. It's actually sin. If you've never invited Jesus into your heart, and invited him to come in and take over the throne of your life, this is the time. Life is like a vapor, like we said before. It's short. None of us know if we even have tomorrow. And so don't put this off any further. And if that's the desire of your heart, you thought, that's something I'm going to do when the time is right. Well, the time is right now. And if you've never received him, just follow me in this prayer. We're going to pray a prayer. I'm going to say it, and you just follow along. And if this is the prayer of your heart, you say this to the Lord. All right. Heavenly Father, thank you for the gift of life that you've given me. And as I come before you today, I want to confess that I have not always made the best of the time that you've given me. There are plenty of things I've tried and failed at and never bothered to consult with you before I tried them. And Lord, there are plenty of things I know I need to do, and I know you want me to do them, but I just keep putting them off. Lord, that changes today. I commit myself now to get her done. But most importantly, Lord, I put off receiving your Son, Jesus. And Father, right now, I invite Jesus into my heart. I open the door of my life. And I know your promise is that Jesus will come in, that he will dine with me and I with him, that we'll fellowship together. Lord, thank you for saving me so that I can spend eternity with you. And I pray this now in the name of Jesus. Amen.